When people talk about Watch Dogs 1, almost every discussion stays locked inside Chicago. But one of the most overlooked pieces of the game is actually the Pawnee ctOS substation, a remote, rundown outpost that ends up revealing one of the biggest secrets about Blume's surveillance network. Most players treat Pawnee as a side area, a weird, half-forgotten town, covered in conspiracy posters and abandoned cabins. But if you take a closer look at what's happening in that substation, you start to realize something surprising. Pawnee is the only place in Watch Dogs 1 where ctOS behaves like it's watching you back. As if the system isn't just running scripts, but evaluating you as a threat in real time. The Pawnee ctOS server is filled with corrupted data clusters, glitched camera feeds, and scrambled digital files that don't match anything you see in the rest of the game. It's almost like this one substation is trying to hide a mistake, something the system doesn't want you to see. When Aiden breaks into the core, the surveillance logs don't look like normal ctOS reports. Instead, they're storing strange behavioral recordings and fragmented psychological notes about people living in the area, including data that ctOS has no reason to collect. These aren't just criminal profiles, they're patterns, tracking paranoia, mental health, emotional reactions, and what locals believe about Blume. Pawnee becomes the only place where ctOS is clearly gathering non-criminal predictive data, testing how people respond to fear, rumor, and manipulation. This is important because in the main story, ctOS is always sold as a system that improves efficiency, fights crime, and keeps cities safe. But Pawnee exposes a darker truth. ctOS is actually conducting social experiments. The game never outright states it, but the evidence is everywhere. Abnormal analytics inside the substation, strange behavior from NPCs, and the fact that Pawnee is isolated enough for Blume to run a test without oversight. This is why the area feels off. The system isn't just monitoring, it's testing reactions, nudging people, and studying how misinformation spreads in a small community. There's also a detail most players miss. Pawnee's ctOS is older and more unstable than the Chicago network. That means this location was likely one of the earliest testing grounds for the entire ctOS project. Before Blume perfected their citywide system, they tried it in a place where no one would question glitches, unexplained outages, or sudden shifts in public behavior. And that lines up with the weird, almost surreal encounters you find scattered around the outskirts. People talking about the machines, others complaining about hallucination like radio interference, and townsfolk who already distrust outsiders before you even interact with them. What makes this even more unsettling is that nothing Aiden does in Pawnee officially appears in Blume's public logs. It's as if the company deliberately scrubbed the site from their internal records, pretending this early experiment never happened. And that's the real story hiding there. Pawnee wasn't just a secondary area. It was ctOS's first sandbox, a place where Blume learned how to manipulate an entire population long before the world ever heard of smart surveillance. The Chicago network didn't succeed because Blume was brilliant. One part of Watch Dogs 1 that most players shrug off as a goofy side feature, but is actually one of the strangest, most deliberately designed pieces of the entire game. It's the digital trips. These aren't just mini-games or distractions, they're full-on commercial hallucinogenic simulations, packaged and sold inside Aiden's world as consumer entertainment. And they quietly reveal how deeply technology has begun to rewrite human perception long before ctOS ever takes over Chicago. What makes digital trips fascinating is that they're not portrayed as illegal or underground. They're advertised in-universe like a social trend, something people casually participate in the same way we use VR today. And in Watch Dogs, the line between a recreational sim and a psychological vulnerability is razor thin. Take Spider Tank, the most well-known trip. On the surface, it's a chaotic power fantasy. Climb buildings, destroy cops, stomp cars. But the design is intentionally exaggerated. It pushes the player into a dissociative mode where the boundary between human and machine disappears. In the game world, this isn't just a fun arcade experience. It hints at how normalized mechanized violence has become within a society built entirely around surveillance and control. The digital trip is conditioning you to think like a machine and enjoy it. That's not accidental, that's commentary. Horror Trip, also known as Madness, goes even deeper. Instead of empowering you, it disorients you. Flickering shadows, corrupted demons, a city twisting itself into surreal, unstable geometry. This mode actually reflects the underlying instability of the real world of Watch Dogs. When you play it, the rules of physics and pattern recognition break down. And interestingly, the game files confirm that Madness is built to simulate fear responses, which subtly ties back to how ctOS measures and manipulates behavior. Even though digital trips aren't part of the core storyline, they're designed with the same thematic backbone: data, perception, control. In a city where technology observes every move you make, these trips show you how easily that same technology can distort your sense of reality. Conspiracy is perhaps the most unsettling. You roam the city looking for cyborg invaders disguised as civilians, scanning them to identify their hidden features. What's clever is that this trip doesn't change the map much. The environment is nearly identical to the real world. Only the enemies are artificial. That design choice matters. It's training you to distrust the people around you, to evaluate them as potential threats based on invisible data. Exactly what ctOS does every second of every day. If Spider Tank blurs the line between player and machine, Conspiracy blurs the line between surveillance and paranoia. What ties all the digital trips together is that they reflect different psychological impacts of a hyper-connected society. They show how escapism becomes a commercial product, how fantasy normalizes violence or fear, and how simulations can reshape cognition. None of this is canon critical, but it enriches the world. It proves the developers weren't just building a hacking game, they were building a future where technology doesn't stop at observing people.